Well. This episode of the Paul Rivera Podcast has been long overdue. I have a very, very close friend of mine who just coincidentally happens to be a Nike design legend. On this episode, we talk about his 30-plus rejections, or as he calls them, opportunities to come back. We talk about his foray into Nike golf. We talk about him working on the Olympics. And we talk about him working with GOATs. Hope you enjoy the show with David Creech, my friend, Nike Design VP. Enjoy. Peace. For anyone that's ever listened to or watched this podcast, all four of you out there, you know I don't prepare for shows at all. If there's a lesser level of preparation possible, that's what I did for this show.
Thank you for that intro.
I got David Creech here. Long list of accomplishments, long list of great things he's done at the swoosh. We'll get into a bunch of all that stuff, and more importantly, how long have we known each other? We've known each other for a long time.
I think at least 10 years.
Right, 10 years?
But around 10 years.
But I also feel they're like dog years. Like we've known each other and traveled and done stuff.
That's right.
It feels like it's been like 70 years.
The mentoring sessions, workouts, etc. Yeah.
Who's mentoring who?
Some would say tomato, some would say tomato.
Well, it's good, brother. Good to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
You came all the way from Portland. I appreciate that.
Of course.
We've been having back and forth conversations. The last episode I did was with Maverick Carter, and you had a couple of issues with that you should have been before him, I believe. Do you want to talk about that at all? Or
well, I mean, it's simply I went with alphabetical. Creech, Carter, but really I went with David Maverick. But that's fine.
Neither here nor there. So I want a lot to cover. You and I met back when I was at Nike. I'm trying to think what year I went to camp. I don't know if you remember. So let's go back at it. You were working on LeBron. I was working on LeBron. Yep. You were heading up design.
Yep.
And I was a total fish out of water, like New York City kid, Beaverton, Oregon. I like they dragged me to Portland. I didn't even unpack my stuff. I was like, I'm not gonna make any friends here. And then the least person I think I become friends with is this guy sitting across from me. And I don't think I've ever told you this. I think the thing that attracted me to you as a friend was it's like we both every day felt like we probably didn't even belong where we were, right? We were like lucky. Like I mean that in a positive way. Yeah. So we'll get back to that. I want to start a little bit at the beginning with you, like because similar to me, you always tell me like you didn't have a very traditional, upbringing personally, and you definitely didn't have a traditional path to your career now. So let's start David Creech, early days.
We're going to go back into the 70s. I mean, you're right. I mean, I think, you said we didn't I felt like we were blessed, but, before we met, I was born in Seoul, South Korea, but adopted at a very young age, grew up in Oregon. So
how old were you when you were adopted?
7 months.
Wow.
7 months. So I spoke a little bit of English. No Korean.
You were adopted. You adopted in Seoul.
I was adopted. From Seoul into this town, Newport, Oregon. My dad was a scientist. My mom was a school teacher. We grew up in a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house all our life. But the biggest thing that I think grew for me, the foundation for where I am today, is just this idea of sport. My dad, though he was a scientist. He was head of the Booster Club in Newport for many years.
Wait, your dad was a scientist?
Yeah, studied the ocean. That's why I kind of have some of the ink on my arm. He studied the ocean. He was biology scientist, worked for the science center there in town.
Did you think it was like as a kid like super cool, like where you didn't get it, or was it like?
Yeah, I mean, it was cool because you'd go to the office and he would have sea slugs. Swear to God, he would have sea slugs that he would study. I have no idea study for what, but they would just have a ton of stuff around sea slugs. They would do metrics around waves in the ocean. So that was cool. But, my dad, he was the guy that always, when he would come home from work, hey, let's go shoot hoops out in the side hoop. Let's go play catch with the football. And he would still stay in his kind of button-down collared shirt and pants, and we'd do that. And that ultimately became kind of our relationship and my love for sports. And I grew up loving sports, playing sports, and I think growing up in Oregon, obviously Nike grew up in Oregon, and so that created my passion for the brand.
When did you think, most kids grow up and they want to be a doctor, a lawyer, Michael Jordan, LeBron James. Like, growing up, what did you think you wanted to do?
Well, like all kids, I wanted to be an NBA player, and I'm close.
You realized that hella quick, I'm sure. that wasn't in the cards.
It was. That's another story for you, me, and Nico. But yeah, no. I wanted to actually, back in the 90s, there was those films around architects being the cool guys. And so I wanted to be an architect on a small scale. I took drafting classes when I got into college, but never really knew that was going to be into design, and then until much later, And
then when you went to school, what school did you go to?
So initially I went to Oregon State,
Okay.
And I was majoring in business, and I lasted 2 terms. So for me, again, I just love sports. I wasn't really figuring out what I wanted to do. So I actually, not many people know this, but now all million followers will. I was given a choice by the counselor. You're either going to quit school or we're going to give you a 0.0 GPA. No joke. It was a 0.0.
Were you not going to class? What were you doing?
Yeah, I was playing ball. I'm a baller.
So let me ask you this. You just said your dad's a scientist.
That's right.
Right?
My mom's a school teacher.
Mom's a school teacher. Dad's a successful scientist. There's not any more pressure academically, I'm guessing.
Those 3 things, or those 2 things, you're absolutely right. And they raised us the right way. But just school, I never was into studying, never into books and that kind of stuff.
So you got to school, second semester, they're like, hey, you either like leave or we like make you leave, basically. Right?
Yeah.
So what do you do then? Are you like, I'm done with school, or I got to figure this shit out?
No, I'm done with school. So I leave, and my parents were extremely disappointed, you can imagine, and actually moved down to California. So moved to California. My buddy was playing JUCO college football, and I moved into this apartment, 2-bedroom apartment, 5 football players, and just lived there until my money ran out. And I remember calling my dad like, hey, ready to come back home. And he's like, we're not paying for you to come back home. And so I had to get a job.
He's like,
in this small town in California. And it was crazy because I couldn't get a job. I had no experience.
Wow.
And I had to actually call another family friend whose parents owned a few McDonald's. And they actually made a phone call to the owner of the McDonald's down in this small city in California to get me a job.
So I just want to be clear on the record on this. You couldn't get a job at McDonald's on your own. You needed like a relationship to get you into a McDonald's job.
And that, my friend, is a secret to success. Yeah.
So, but let me ask you this. At this point, you're what, 19, 20 years old?
19, yeah.
Are you like, man, I got to figure this shit out? Like,
yeah, I mean, I was a little bit numb to it. I think I was a little bit careless. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of things going on, and I just wasn't ready, I think. I wasn't ready for school. I probably was studying the wrong thing. But that was close to, I don't want to say the bottom because I was with one of my close friends, but it was tough because you're like, man, what are we going to do now? Mm-hmm. So finally made my way back to Newport, where I grew up and worked there, and then actually ended up going to a junior college. I had to fight my way to get back in. I wanted to go back to Oregon State, but I went to this junior college, Lynn Benton, right down the road, because I had to do that to get back in. And I remember I was 1 credit short of going full time to get my Stafford loan because Dad wasn't paying for anything. Mm-hmm. It was like, you're going to get a loan this time around. So I ended up just taking this drawing 1 class. It was just super random. Just took
like
it
as an elective, like I'll just take this.
Like, hey, I need to get 1 more credit. That's a 3-credit class. Seems easy. Bought some pencils. And the crazy thing was, it was just shading. All you're doing is drawing circles and squares, And I remember talking to the instructor there. I wasn't the best drawer in the class by far.
But up to this point, Creech, did you have like a love for drawing? Like, were you good? Like, at least?
I mean, it's funny because if I look back at it, I sketched stuff, but they were like not great sketches. But I loved design stuff. I loved, unbeknownst to me, when I saw like a great logo, like the Fedex logo was redesigned back in the 90s, I believe. And when it first came out, I was like, man, they didn't do anything. And you heard the news, like how much it cost. But then when you look between the E and the X and you saw that there was an arrow knocked out of the counter spaces of the ENet. You're like, man, that was really, really clever. And I appreciated that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So
you take this class and you think you're just going to take I need these credits.
Get back to Oregon State, go back into business. And the instructor there said, hey, you seem really passionate about this. And, I kind of made a funny, probably joke like, yeah, you can't do anything with it, And she's like, well, have you ever thought about graphic design? I had no idea what that was. I mean, this is like, you can imagine it's in the 90s. Like the Apple wasn't really a computer yet to have programs. You're drawing here. So I ended up meeting with the head guy for the design program and just talked to him.
At the JUCO.
At the JUCO, yeah. Talked through it with him. And he, ironically, used to help lead the program at Oregon State. And he had left to start this program. Wow. So I talked to him. He's like, yeah, you should just take like a Design 1 class next term and just see what you think. Take a design class, a composition class, a color class. So now I'm 2 quarters in of not going back to Oregon State. Get into it. I loved it. Loved it. Everything from color, typography, everything that you kind of foundationally learn as a graphic designer, I loved it. And the rest is kind of history, as far as getting into design.
So you and I, jumping around a little bit, probably a couple of months ago at this point, spoke on a panel together at University of Michigan. And one of the things you said, which definitely resonated with, the college students in the audience, was that you applied to Nike, a number of times and you got a bunch of no's and you kept going back. And I think that resonated with kids, on a bunch of levels. But talk to me a little bit about like that experience, like deciding you want to apply at Nike and what that experience was like.
Yeah, I mean, back then, again, what you don't know, you don't know. So you're right. It was just applications online. And the emails back were, Dear David. And it was 20 to 30 of them. And
wait, 20 to 30 like
letters. Hey, you didn't get this job. You didn't get that job.
So you applied multiple times for different jobs in design.
That's right. And this is over the course of 2 to 3 years. And I was working at an agency in town, but that was over the course of 2 or 3 years.
You got 20 to 30 Dear David letters?
It could be more.
It's like, I'm trying to show some respect here. Like,
yeah, exactly.
So you think you got at least 20 to 30 letters like, hey, thanks, but no thanks.
1,000%. Yeah. I mean, to this day, the recruiter that hired me there has now since moved up in the company, and she and I talk about it. Like, man, there was so many times where it just wasn't the right fit. And I learned that you have to have a connection with people too, to put a face to the work, to then maybe have a chance. But yeah, it took, I don't know if I was naive or if I was dumb, one of the two, but I just kept going. I always wanted to work here at Nike, and it finally kind of cracked through.
So you got 20 to 30 Dear David letters. The letter that said you got a job or an interview at least.
Yeah.
Did it start Dear David as well?
No. So what ended up happening was somewhere between the 20 and 30,
rejections.
The rejection. You can call it rejection. You can call it keep coming back. They sent me a floppy disk. Remember those floppy disks, like 1.4, tiny little floppy disks?
You're way older than I am, so I don't remember any of those.
That's a good point. So they sent me a file. They sent me a file.
They send you a floppy disk.
Floppy disk, and it's got a big black swoosh on it. And what I loved about it was like, man, this is amazing. But there was a letter and basically said, hey, David, we'd love for you to apply a few designs with the swoosh in mind. And so the floppy had a swoosh, like a file with a swoosh guidelines. It's super premium. Like that's, again, Nike. It's very premium. The packaging, you open it up, the disc. And so I designed like 4 posters, a basketball poster, a tennis poster.
So I want to make sure I got this straight. So you apply for a job, right? The 30th time, whatever time. You got a letter back with a floppy disk in it, right? A file disk saying, hey, would you mind designing 4 different designs, reinterpreting the swoosh or something to that effect?
Correct.
Wow. So you got to be excited as shit. Like,
yeah, because it was one step farther than the Dear David letter.
Mm-hmm.
It's like something came back other than an email that said Dear David. It was a physical, tangible thing. And so I designed these 4 things, thought they were brilliant, went to the local Kinko's, printed them out, sent it in, and like a week later I get a call. And so you're excited, you're getting the call from Nike, and they basically say, hey, we showed this to several creative directors and the work's too familiar. And I'm like, man, I was really bummed. And
what's that mean, the work's too familiar? Or how do you understand that?
Like they felt like they're doing that kind of work already.
Okay.
And so what was amazing is the recruiter basically said, but what I love about that is means you can work here. And so from that on, again, probably between the 20 and 30, I started getting calls in to come and interview. So I come in, show my work. Again, wouldn't get it. But eventually I finally got into this job that I probably thought I was overqualified for. It was in Nike Golf, but they loved me. I loved, golf. I just wanted to get there, and they offered me this designer 2 position. And I remember it wasn't a letter. By the time I had left to go back to the agency I was working at, my phone rang, and it was a recruiter, and he's like, "Hey, David, how you doing? How do you think it went?" I said, "I think it went pretty well." And he's like, "Well, I'm calling to let you know we'd like to offer you the job." I was outside the agency I worked at. I mean, it was like all the years, all the McDonald's, the JUCO, growing up in a small, all those things came to that head. And it was like, man, mama, I made it.
I tell people this story all the time. Like when I got my first job at Nike, Kevin O'Connor, who we both know, called me. He hired me in New York, and he told me how much I was making, and I was making $70,000. And I called my mom. I was like, "You can quit, Mom. We did it." She's like, "Boy, you better carry your ass to work." Just like I'm going to on Monday.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So one thing I definitely want to make sure we kind of double click on is, obviously the story is incredible of you, applying 20, 30 times, and getting, no thank yous, basically, Dear David letters, as you called them. And then even when you get to that second level of like interviewing, it's still more like no thank yous. And then you finally get an opportunity, and which you felt you were potentially overqualified for. What was your thought process? And like, you know what, I'm still gonna take this opportunity and just make it work and make the best of it.
Yeah, I mean,
and the reason why I say that is most people wouldn't get by the first one. After the third rejection, it's like, man, forget these guys, they don't get it.
Yeah.
After getting to the second level or second stage and not getting it, it's like, man, forget these guys. And then after getting the job and thinking you're overqualified for it, it's like, these guys definitely don't get it. I'm out of here. Like, what was your thought process going through that, even when you got the job?
I don't even know if I had one, but if I was to look back at it, I think it was about validation. Like, hey, Nike's the best, and to be the best, you need to work at Nike. And so I think there was that perseverance. I do think when the recruiter sent that disc to me, that probably was toward the end of where I was potentially going to say, you know what, this isn't it. And so that gave me a little bit of life. But, you and I talk about this all the time. I believe things happen for a reason. Probably that perseverance and that drive for 2+ years of not getting in gives me the drive today. I think I'm always hungry, but I'm always grateful. I'm grateful for the opportunities. I'm grateful for the teams that you get to work with. Like that to me goes beyond, because I still, like, the way I was able to describe it to you, it's like in the back of my mind, and yet it was only like 5 years ago, because I'm 19.
So you get this job, Nike Golf. What's that like? What are you working on? Like, what's the first job?
So working on packaging, so golf ball packaging, branding for clubs, photo shoots with the athletes, and the one thing, I came from this agency, Sandstrom Design. They're known for packaging, and I worked on this packaging where it was a little bit unorthodox. So you're not a big golfer, I know. Do you play golf?
No, I can drive the hell out of a golf cart, though, and make a good margarita.
Fair. But anyway, so I worked on this unorthodox packaging, but understood the strategy of how it was going to be put on a shelf, because clubhouses are different than retailers and they don't change. And long story short, it was a very modern aesthetic for golf. And the president of the brand was like, let's roll, let's do it. And we did it. And I was fortunate enough, because that went into the market. Did it help our golf sales? I don't know. But what it did do was continue to develop Nike as kind of a progressive thinker, innovation thinker around sport,
Were you in Nike Golf when Tiger was there?
I was, yeah.
So you're basically taking credit for Tiger. That's what you're saying. You made Tiger. I just want to make sure we say this.
You know what? I was around a lot of athletes in my career at Nike. No, yeah, I was.
What was that like? Like, what was that time like? Just like, I tell you why I ask. I remember being at Nike, and obviously I worked Nike basketball, but Tiger had such a like halo effect over just like the brand. Like he was just his star, like at his highest point was just so incredible. Like, did you guys feel the energy of that like in Nike golf?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, all the iconic athletes of our generation. We're fortunate enough to work with them. You get to work with one of them right now, and it just changes the whole scope of what you're doing. There's an energy, there's a drive, there's a camaraderie of team. Like, again, I think Nike does such an incredible job of building teams that all have different skill sets toward a common vision or a common goal. So, yeah, I mean, but I was a kid, I was a kid there, and I was just happy to be there, man.
Just happy to have a
happy
job.
to be there.
So how long are you at Nike Golf before your next role?
Nike Golf, 2.5 years. And then again, ironically, the golf ball packaging caught the eye of one of the head guys in brand creative and brand design, because he was a golfer.
Okay.
And he noticed the packaging and talked to my boss at the time, saying, hey, who worked on this stuff? And so I got to meet him. And anyway, so we hit it off. And about a year later, I'd say, I get the call to say, hey, we want you to work on the Beijing Olympics.
Wow.
So I was going from Nike Golf, this kid, and now, hey, we're going to go work on Beijing Olympics in 2007, 2008. And that was incredible. I mean, that opened my eyes because, again, the design teams, there was such great expertise around retail, experience, branding, photography.
Yeah, can you break down a little, like when you say you were going to work on the Beijing Olympics, like what's that mean?
Yeah, so you're on a team. I mean, like I said, Nike has these teams, and I was fortunate enough to be on this design team that worked on bringing to life the product for the Beijing Olympics and the photography of the athletes.
Wow.
And so that was an incredible experience to be able to work with that team and build kind of, at the time, the first visible technology since air. It was Flywire.
Wow. And then, so how long out, I know Nike gets ahead of everything, how long out, the Beijing Olympics were 08?
08. Yeah.
How long in advance do you start working on 08 Olympics?
I was there in 2007, and I'm sure there was stuff happening probably prior to that as well. Like I said, when you're in brand design, you're kind of toward the end of the journey as far as creating assets and or experiences, stories for the brand.
So 08 Olympics, and I've always wondered this, like when so you were at Nike Golf, doing an amazing job there, you got the opportunity to work on the Olympics. You're not going back to your role or job at Nike Golf, correct? You may not know what the next job is. How's that work? Like, you're working on a special, obviously huge project, but career-wise, do you know what's next while you're working on Olympics?
No, because again, I think at that time, I'm still kind of young. And again, happy to be there. Everything's so fast and so dynamic. You don't have time to think about that stuff. And so 2 years go by like that, as you know. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I wasn't thinking about, am I going back into golf? What is my next? It was just focused on the Olympics. But soon after that, and we get close to when we met, I went into North America and helped start up brand design in North America. And that was incredible because, again, that's where it's closer to the consumer. There's activations that are going on, Spike Bus, Boombox, World Basketball Festival was kind of coming from the global team.
Yep.
So that was exciting time. And you got to work with the dynamic, again, marketing team and design team to create things relevant to the consumer.
So what's your next big role post 08 Olympics?
So it was design director of North America brand design. I did that for 2 years.
That's all categories? That's all
categories,
sports, right?
All
Yeah.
categories in North America, yep. And again, doing the same type of design work that I did for the Beijing Olympics. And then I get the call to say, hey, listen, we want you to be the senior creative director at Nike Basketball. Mm-hmm. And
when we met.
That's when we met.
That's when your life changed, when you met me, basically. Just say it for you.
It changed, yes. But yeah, that's when it was like Nike. That's my,
I was just gonna ask that. So let's, we started this saying, you was a hooper and loved to play ball, and even going back to like the driveway, one-on-ones with your pops. Like, was that a moment for you in your career? Like, oh, I'm working on Nike Basketball. Like,
it was a moment for so many reasons. I think one, I remember some of my close friends would have like the True Blue AJ3s. We couldn't afford them, but they had them. But like it just reminded you of like it was something different back then. And then you fast forward and like the Gatorade Be Like Mike commercials, obviously the 92 Barcelona Dream Team. I loved basketball. And then there was a team, I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, the Portland Trailblazers. But they had an amazing run, though never made the championship.
Which, by the way, Creech is the biggest Portland Trailblazers homer, man. They win one game in October, and he's like, I'm telling you, we're looking good, baby. We see the trophy. You are a diehard Trailblazers fan.
Yeah, I love the Blazers, man. My parents love the Blazers. Shout out to them. The games wouldn't be on TV very much when I was growing up, and so we listened to it on the radio.
Wow.
We'd have the radio. My dad would make popcorn. We listened to it in the living room. All of us as a family just listened to the game. It was crazy.
Wow. So you got the call, Nike basketball.
Get the call, Nike basketball. I mean, this is, after you see an amazing, Battlegrounds, World Basketball Festival 1.0 just happened. LeBron's coming in already. KD. I'm not sure if Kyrie was still there. Kobe's a big thing. And it was like, man, this is it. Again, mama, I made it, but Nike basketball.
And I think, this is something you can't say, but I'll say it. I remember being there. It's hard to imagine Nike basketball not being like the superpower it is today. But there was a point in time when it wasn't the superpower it is today, right? So, and I think that time you're talking about coming into the category, like it was an exciting time because to your point, there were a lot of things like aligning and the brand had a bunch of wins and it started to feel like this groundswell of like, oh, we have an opportunity here to take this. Like this is like a moonshot, right? Like, did you feel that energy around that time?
I absolutely did. I mean, I think Kobe was on the top of his game.
Absolutely.
LeBron was at the top of his game. KD was coming up into his own top of his game. And the NBA was taking off. I mean, as you know, it was just taking off. And so it was an incredible time to be there. And again, I go back to the idea that things happen for a reason. People are blessed in life. And the timing to be at that moment in that time in Nike basketball, I'm sure you feel the same way. It was such a great opportunity for us and for all the teams that got to work on that work. What
are some of the highlights top of mind for you during your time at Nike basketball?
I think obviously the World Basketball Festival work led by the team before I got there, and then we carried it through. That was amazing. I think dimensionalizing the brands around LeBron, quite frankly. I think that was a big one. But again, I think just creating Nike basketball as a front runner, an icon to the industry, beyond just sneakers. I thought that was a memorable time.
So we've talked about your journey at Nike up to this point, right? And it's like you get in Nike golf, you're an avid golfer, you work on the Olympics, doesn't get much bigger than the Olympics, right? I don't think there's anything bigger than the Olympics. Then you get to work kind of your dream category, sport, Nike basketball, and work with some of the biggest superheroes in the world, right? Kobe's, LeBron's of the world, like young KD. Is there a moment when you're like, where do I go from here, right? Like you've accomplished so much in your young career, you're doing great work. Are you thinking at any point like, I'm not sure what I do from here or like what's next?
Yeah, I think yes and no. I think you're always thinking about what's next. I think as a designer, you're always not satisfied. You're always tweaking. You're always changing. As you know, you work with many designers. So yeah, I think you're doing that, but you're also in the moment too. I think because the work's so dynamic and the teams are high octane, you're in the moment and you're appreciating the moment. And but yeah, in the back of your mind, you're always thinking, okay, well, what can be better than this?
Right.
It's Nike basketball.
Right. I think we've all been blessed to ask ourselves that question. And you're like, oh, there is, we always joke about like chapters, right? Like in our story. And you're like, man, I think you texted me one time. I had done something. I can't remember what it was. And you were like, man, I don't know if you remember this text. You were like, I would have told you to write a book 2 years ago, but like you have so many more chapters, man. Like, so I think we've been blessed in that. It's like, you think you're not the mountaintop because that sounds wrong, but you think like, man, it can't get better than this. I'm so fulfilled professionally. Right. Yeah. And then just working for a great brand like the Swoosh, just to, the opportunities that come with that. Right. So you're at Nike basketball, you're heading up design, brand design for that. Your next role isn't Jumpman, is it? What's your next role?
No, my next role would be then I worked on the Rio London Olympics with the teams and a few World Cups. And then I ended up taking on vice president of brand design. So I took on all categories.
Wow. What's that mean to a person that doesn't understand Nike Matrix org? How would you best explain just even like design at Nike? That's probably a better way.
Yeah, I mean, so we have categories: running, basketball, women's, sportswear, etc. And they have marketing functions and other functions. And there's a brand design function, and their job is to partner with marketing to create stories, bring the stories to life for the consumer through product, athlete, voice. So I was in Nike basketball, but there was other people like me, creative directors of different categories. And then, my next role was in VP of brand design. So I kind of took on the category offense. But again, you have a robust team, creative directors for each category to get after that.
And how long are you in this role?
I'm in that role about 3 years, I think. If my math is right, I'm about 3 years, and that's when I then get the tap to go into the Jumpman.
So, to my previous point of thinking, like, man, like it doesn't get much better than this, right? Like I'm working on the things I want to work on, working with my heroes, working on like amazing athletes, superheroes as I call them, and literally the most iconic sports moments, the Olympics, as I said, doesn't get much bigger than that. And then you get a call like, hey, we want you to come over to the Jumpman, to the Jordan brand.
That's right.
Do you remember where you were or how that happened, like when you first heard the news?
Yeah, I was actually on sabbatical. I was actually on vacation.
You're always on vacation, man. How's that possible? How's such a successful guy like you always on vacation?
I don't know.
So you're on vacation.
I'm on vacation. I actually get a call on my birthday. Shout out to my birthday. I get a call on my birthday, and they say, "Hey, David, we'd like you to take on the role of creative director, vice president of design for the Jordan brand." And it took a while for me because when you're on vacation, you kind of step away, hopefully, and
AKA you're drunk. But go ahead, continue. Tell your version. It's fine.
No, kids, I'm not. But I'm like, And as they explained it to me, you're over footwear design, apparel, color, material, graphics, brand, retail, concept. So over the whole thing in Jordan from a design standpoint. And it was an incredible opportunity because, again, you go back into the early 90s when, the AJ3 is coming out. MJ is doing his thing. Like all of us when we were growing up, it's like he was the guy. That was the moment. If you love basketball. And so I don't want to say full circle, but then you get to this moment and you realize, man, like the creative director for the Jordan brand.
And is that surreal for you? Because you mentioned just a little bit ago, like your friends had, the threes, True Blues, I think you said, which you couldn't afford at the time or whatnot. It's like, and now you're helping kind of not rewrite, but at least guide, right, what the future looks like for the Jordan brand. Like that moment, like did that surrealness hit you? Like,
yeah, I think so. And again, I think like everything happens so quickly, and life, as is full, and work's a part of it, family's a part of it, friend. And so really sitting back someday, hopefully, to digest everything. You and I reflect all the time, but you just keep going. But yeah, I mean, I was very grateful for the call and the opportunity, because again, we're talking about a kid that started in graphic design at a junior college. I mean, graphic design to now being over footwear and apparel, as well as brand and retail of the Jordan brand. And that's an incredible opportunity.
I remember one thing I super respect of you, like in your career, is you've always taken the craft, the job, and the opportunity super seriously. And I don't even know if you remember this conversation. You called me when the Jumpman role was offered to you, or first at least discussed with you. And I was like super excited, like, holy shit, this is a really big deal. And your first point was like, I want to make sure I can do this. Like you felt such a responsibility to like, because I think, was it footwear you hadn't done yet? There was
footwear and apparel.
Yeah. So you were like, I want to make sure I can do this. I want to make sure I can be great at this. Like most people would just be happy like with the job. I have a big job and I'll figure it out. Like why that thought? Why even like that responsibility to yourself of like wanting to make sure you could do this job but not being sure? Clearly you could.
No, I think that's a great question. I think, you always have at least I had the mentality still of the 20 to 30 rejection letters. To be honest with you, it was growing up in a small town, not in a big city. It was honorable mention 3A basketball all league versus first team. It was all those things probably built up to that moment. And to your point, like, I take design seriously. I obsess details. I think all great designers do. And you want to be great. You don't want to fail, So it probably had all those kind of emotions and or things to think about.
So I'll tell you a story. The first time I met Jay-Z, I was a little nervous, and that I wasn't sure. I wasn't nervous in meeting him. I was nervous in how to address him. So I wasn't sure if I was to be like, "What's up, Jay?" Right? Like, "What's up, Hove?" And him be like, "My friends call me Hove. I don't know you, clown." Like, "Hey, Mr. Carter. Hey, Sean." Like, I wasn't sure. Like, so your first time gonna meet Mike, right? Yeah. He's on campus or whatnot. You're gonna meet him. What are your thoughts? I mean, this is, in many of our eyes, like GOD, as it, refers to basketball. Like, initial thoughts when you're like, holy shit, I'm gonna meet like Mike.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't even remember the first time it was, but it had to have been with a footwear review. I was fortunate because Larry Miller, at the time president of the Jordan brand, kind of helped start the Jordan brand, gave me the ultimate compliment, like, "Hey, listen, I've talked to MJ about you. You should feel good about it, etc." So I had that in my head, but I think it was again probably back to a little bit naive. But yeah, you're right. If I overthought it too much, I probably would have been like, man. But it was just you kind of went with it. I mean, it's not much different than when you meet some of the other athletes that we get to meet when we work what we do. So, but yeah, I mean, it's MJ. So there was that.
So, of what you can tell me, there's legendary stories of like Mike being as focused a basketball player as he was. Like, he takes his business as seriously, right? And obviously he's built an incredible brand, one of the strongest brands in the world, and in the Jordan brand. What did you learn most from just, your time spent with him and just working on the category itself? Anything that stands out to you?
The attention to detail that he has, the understanding of not just the business, but product design and athlete needs was unmatched. It was incredible to hear his insights and understand the carrying of what he wanted to create, the brand and the product.
So you're working at the Jumpman, the Jordan brand. Any highlights, anything? Because that feels like it was a blur. How long were you there?
3.5 years, almost 4.
You were there that long? 3.5 years?
Time flies, man.
Feels like a blur.
A blur.
Highlights. And it's actually like 2, like it just happened yesterday. So like anything, like what are your takeaways?
I mean, I think All-Star Weekend in LA was amazing for us, being able to truly own that on the court, seeing all the players wear the Jumpman. The game shoe launch with the 33 was pretty epic. I mean, it all kind of, it's funny because you talked about retrospect. You don't sit back and appreciate the moments. I think you're just constantly moving forward, thinking about the next. And so it's all those opportunities that are in front of you, and you appreciate the people that you get to work with and the projects and the events. So it's hard to single out one.
So we're going chronologically in chronological order of your career. I just said, when you look back at your days at Jumpman, you're in a new role.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about the new role? What's the new role?
The new role starts Tuesday, next Tuesday. Vice president of brand creative, working in North America with the team to kind of get after all things creative in North America. I'm looking forward to coming back for podcast number 2 to tell you more about it. But I'm excited about it. Met some of the team. It's a great opportunity. Again, the beauty about Nike is being able to continue to evolve and grow within the brand, new experiences, new teams, and continue to be challenged.
So, VP of, what was the role again?
Brand creative.
VP of brand creative, North America.
Yeah.
How the hell does a kid adopted from Seoul, drops out, kind of I won't say kicked out, I won't put words, but dropped out, right?
I left. I didn't get kicked out.
You're not breaking up with me. I'm breaking up with you. You know, like,
but I look back.
Leaves school. Was working at a McDonald's. Shout out to McDonald's. Living with a friend. Goes to a JUCO longer than he anticipated. How the hell's that kid end up here where you're sitting in front of me today? How's that happen?
Man, I mean, when you put it that way, it's a great question. But I think, it's the teams you work on, the experiences, I think it's a little bit of luck, a lot of hard work, a lot of, you respect and trust a lot of people to get that. I mean, it's not just me, it's everybody that you worked with. You were one of them.
Some people would call it a mentor. Whatever. I'm not here. The show isn't about me. It's not about me.
That's fair. But yeah, I mean, again, it goes so fast. But I just think every experience you have, if you're open to being curious and being a sponge, if you work hard, if you respect the people you work with, if you trust the people you work with, you can wake up one day and be in great opportunities. I truly believe it.
One thing that stands out to me in your journey, I didn't know this till, and we've been friends for a decade now. I didn't know this till hearing you say this on the show. You said that someone at Nike saw the packaging you had designed in Nike Golf, right? And I always marvel at that. I think there's especially in today's generation, there's sometimes a mindset of what I'm doing doesn't really matter, right? I'm just doing this till I can do what I really want to do. And what people sometimes don't understand is no, what you're doing now directly impacts and affects what you're going to do next, right?
1,000%.
So I think, and I've asked you, about your journey. It's you never necessarily knew what your next step was, but you focused kind of on what was right there smack in front of you. What do you attribute that to in terms of your success, right? It's always easy to look forward and say, hey, you know what, cool, I'm doing this. The job I really want is this. What do you attribute that to, that, for between 2 and 3 years at a time, you've been able to focus relentlessly on what the task at hand is and how that's led to your next opportunity?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it was having a vision, whether it was from me or from someone above me, having a vision of where we wanted to take that particular I'll call it era. And so we were working all things toward that. And that's critical, because if the vision isn't set, it's hard to then get multiple functions from design to marketing to retail to sales to whatever to align to that. And so I think you have to have strong leaders that set that vision, and then you go to it. And then for me personally, it's interesting. My dad always told me to leave things in a better place than when you found it. And whether that was if you're staying at a friend's house, make the bed. If you're going into the kitchen, clean the kitchen. And so I do have that mindset, a little bit of a blue collar mindset, if that makes sense, where it's hey, if I'm going to go into something, I obviously want to do a great job, and hopefully the team does a great job, and leave it in a better place than when I came into it.
Love that. I always try to make sure, I think all of it is super helpful, but that our listeners, I think a lot of our listeners, again, all 7 of them, all 7 of them, listen or watch this show because the people we have on it, they can learn something from them that they can directly take and use for their journey, right? Yeah. So for, whether they're designers or just young marketers or young brand people or young entrepreneurs, that, I think that the worst feeling you can have when you're trying to start your career is like helplessness, right? You have a dream and you have a vision, man, I want to be there, right? Because in Instagram, that's the other thing, right? It's you see everyone's best self. Man, that guy has an awesome job. That guy's got the best job. That guy hangs out with this athlete, right? And they don't feel like they have any idea of how to get in and get started, right? I'm sure that kid, when you were where were you when you were at your friend's house, the JUCO?
It was in Eureka, California.
No idea where that is. Eureka.
They had a McDonald's.
So what do you say to that kid that's in Eureka, right? That has big dreams, but's not sure how to even get started, that maybe has had 10, 15, 20 letters that say, hey, dear John Doe, thank you, but no thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think it's perseverance, and I think you have to surround yourself with the right network. I think if I look back on it, whether it was my family or friends that constantly were in your corner unconditionally, and even today, I believe to be where you are, you have to have that same support system, if that makes sense. So I think there's that. And then I think it's always stay positive. You have to stay positive. No one wants someone that's negative. No one wants someone that's down. Stay positive and keep going. And it sounds easy to say today, but those are things that I think will help you no matter what you do. If you're positive, you have a great support system. You're open to learning and looking at self to say, what can I do to be better? Believe it or not, those 4 posters I designed, whether at the time I thought, well, wait a second, my work's already good enough. Why do I have to design 4 new posters? But at the time, that actually probably helped me get into the next conversation of, oh, hey, by the way, I actually like the fact that they're familiar because it means you can work here. And so it's just constantly staying positive and looking for that crack. You just need that subtle little crack to get in, and then you worry about the next one. Don't try to take the biggest scoop out and all of a sudden try to go from, the probably all-star McDonald's employee to the VP of whatever, or the owner of whatever. It's like, just take small wins. You always say this, just take a win.
Take a win. Put points on the board.
Put points
take
on
the
the
field
board.
goal.
Yeah, kind of like when I made that. Oh, wait, I missed a shot.
Actually, we're going to end the show on that. So a story you guys probably don't know is Nike, as you can imagine, they actually hire, there's a lot of like ex-athletes that work at Nike.
A lot of
male and female, like just a lot of.
Thank you.
A lot of high level, like ex D1 athletes.
Semi-pro athletes
Yeah,
or pro athletes.
yeah, 100%. So the, do we call them intramurals? Is it intramurals?
I call it A-League, and that was the top league.
So the sports leagues, right? There's a basketball league, soccer league, flag football, whatever. So the basketball league had like guys that played at Oregon State, like guys that played overseas, guys that were pros in the league. Like, so the league was very, very competitive. So the year I actually worked in Beaverton on campus, I played on Creech's team. I just said I played on his team, and it was me, Creech, Nico Harrison, who's a hell of a ball player and is still at Nike. Who else was on the team that you
Derek
remember?
Foster.
Derek Foster. It was a crew of was it mostly like brand and sports marketing people, right? Fair?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, exactly. And probably a little bit of footwear guys, but they were all former players.
Like real ball players. These guys all could play, right? So
all of us could, yes.
So we played in the A-League, which is the best league, most competitive league. And Nico was head and shoulders, shout out to Nico, the best player on the team. And as was normal, Nico has the hot hand one game. I want to say he has 50 or he has 48 at this point.
It doesn't matter.
I want to say Nico has 50 points. Like literally, like not like he was hot. No, he has 50 points this game.
And to be clear, we're going against other players that are D1 players.
Yes. No, it's
he was like Geron.
Yeah, there's real ball players.
Yeah.
So Nico has a cool 50. We're down 1 point.
1 point.
1 point. It's like 6 seconds left.
Yep.
We call a timeout. We have the ball. So who do you think the ball's going to? Clearly Nico, right? So we draw up this play. I think I'm inbounding it. Creech will pop up to the top of the key. I'll pass it to Creech. We'll set a double pin down screen for Nico. He comes off the double screen, gets the ball, and does what he does, gets a bucket. We win. We go home. Creech, you want to tell them how the play actually played out?
Well, first of all, shout out to Liv and Mo for hearing this story, high school athletes. I was open. And for whatever reason, they double-teamed Nico. I was open, so I took the shot. Just like I took the shot 20 to 30 times. Unfortunately, it was those 20 to 30 times of rejection letters that I did not make the shot.
Hey, you take the shot with the game on the line. You leave the follow-through. Here's the funny part. You missed the shot. Let's be clear. You missed the shot. We lose the game.
I don't think I hit the rim.
No. You didn't hit the rim. You didn't hit the rim. You leave the follow-through up like you thought it was going to be good, right? So I go up to you being the good team I am. I give you dap, and I'm like, you thought it was good? He goes, I'm going to be honest, P. I knew it was off the second it left my hand. And that right there, my friends, is literally like, I can't think of a better definition of you, David Creech, our friendship. I want to thank you for being on the show. I think, honestly, whether the viewers or the listeners are designers, marketers, young entrepreneurs. There's a lot of lessons learning and that just the perseverance of where you've been. I'm excited to have you on the show 12 months from now, see where your journey is taking you then. Any closing words? You got to shout out my nieces, one of which is in college now, which is nuts.
Yeah, Olivia, what up? Just started college down in L.A., Orange County, and Mo just started volleyball. Mallory, yeah.
Jesus, we're getting old, man.
We're getting really old. I think when you first started knowing them, they were babies, and now they're,
To the next chapter. You know what? I'll actually have them on the show next time. Thanks for coming.
They'll be a
on,
lot
brother.
better. I appreciate it, brother.
Appreciate you. Peace.